I'm Mitchell Levy, global credibility expert, and we're at one of the funnest times of my week. Although a lot of my week is a lot of fun. But what makes this particularly valuable is having someone I get to interview who I get to share with you, who I find to be a pretty special human. Today we have Brian Barraza. Brian, welcome. So, buddy, who are you?
I am a professional runner based in Boulder, Colorado. I'm also an author, a designer, student of the world.
So, what does professional runner mean?
It means that I orient myself towards the sport of track and field and road racing with professional intent. I compete at national and sometimes international championships, trying to run as fast as humanly possible.
And tell me a little bit more about your life. Who are you?
So I'm a pretty introspective person. I spend a lot of time reflecting on who I am and how I interact with the world around me. And I think through that, I'm able to learn a lot about who others are and how they interact with the world around them, which I always find to be something that's really interesting. Um, I'm a person who loves to read and to draw and to be creative. I have a small business that I am the solopreneur for, and I sell creative services doing animation and logo design and web design, different creative things that allow me to flex my creative muscles.
So you're physical and you're creative. What else?
Definitely. Um, I'm relational. I place a lot of value on the connections that I have with other people, and I do my best to make people feel seen and safe on the deepest levels that I possibly can in any interaction that I have with them.
Oh, interesting. How do people when people get attracted to you, what are they grabbing onto? What do they feel or what do they see?
I think most times they're resonating with the love that I have within me and the deep presence and deep space that I'm able to cultivate. I think a lot of the times people are either wrapped up in their own narratives and they don't really do the best job of holding space for others and actually seeing them and seeing them as people instead of objects for transactions or antagonists to whatever narrative that they're currently holding. So I think one of the things that people love about being around me is that I'm a space for them to exist and to just be, and whatever that means for them in that moment is what I'm there for.
That's interesting. Okay. I know what it means when somebody says they come around me for the love within me. But what does that mean to you?
It means that there's always going to be an aura of non-judgmental curiosity that I bring to each situation. That one of the things that I feel like I can gift to people as a loving act of compassion is to hold space for and try to understand, and not just to hear like a story that somebody's telling me as like a series of events that happens, but also to see it as you know symbolic of who they are as people, or empathize with the challenges that must be in there, and not just be like, oh yeah, so the next thing that happened must have been this, right? But to try to understand, like, how did you deal with that, or how 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 did you make the decision, or how did this come to be important to you? And like I try to get a sense of perspective about who each person is that I come into contact with.
And how do you do that? How does one get a perspective of somebody else?
I think it happens through multiple levels. Like obviously through conversation, you're able to get a lot of intellectual information about a person. But I think there's also like a felt sense experience that we're all capable of tapping into, you know, paying attention to who a person is through the way that they moderate their energy. If I'm sitting here and I'm calm and this gives off some essence of who I am. But if I come in and I'm like, yeah, like Billy Mays, let me sell you something, like that's very different. We pick up on those things, even subtle changes of those through our subconscious processes, and I think I'm pretty in tune with those after a lifetime of paying attention.
How does so do you consciously pay attention to these signals, or do you let things just happen?
It's a bit of both. Sometimes I feel like in any situation that you come into, like you're bringing yourself and your energy and your history into it, on a given day. Sometimes it's a conscious effort to be like, oh man, I am not focusing right now. Like let me pay attention to this person in this way. Like they need that, especially like the people that I coach. It's sometimes like, I'll have just gotten done with my run and my workout, and then I come and sit down and I'm at this meeting with them, and it's like, okay, got to retool. But a lot of the times it's just you know, it's an intuitive feeling at this point, because one of the things that you learn from a lifetime of training is that, like, at a certain point you do enough conscious work and those conscious processes become unconscious, and you don't need to exert as much energy towards them, because you just know that it's going to get done. You've built that structure into whatever mental framework exists within you.
I'm going to switch slightly. I there's a concept to me when I'm thinking about what runners do to prepare for big races. Not your hobbyist, but somebody who calls themselves a professional runner. And there's a certain amount of methodology and approach one puts into running. Could you talk about what that is, and then how have you applied that to the rest of your life?
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that go into preparing for a championship. Um, Most of it happens on the day to day, right? And that's influenced by the structures that you've built in. So for me, I'm part of the Roots Running Project, which is a professional team based in Boulder. And we have people that run everything from the mile to the marathon. And I happen to be a track oriented athlete. And I rely on my team every workout day to, we spend time together and we push each other in workouts, and we do our best to show up for each other in the ways that we need. Uh, and that's like a structure that you wouldn't necessarily think about, but it makes accountability something that's a no-brainer, right? So it's like I think about how best to apply my energy in any situation, and I try to create structures that are going to make it to where I don't have to consciously put effort into making something happen, because the easiest way that my energy can flow in that situation is through the structure that I've created, right? So like an example of this is meeting up with my team for workouts. I'm never going to wake up and be like, oh, I don't want to do it. I'm just not going to, because I have structures in place that are going to, I have to meet with my team. And so it's a no-brainer that energy of like, oh gosh, okay, I gotta get up and I gotta do this. Like that energy is just not wasted there. There's no friction in the system like that, because the structure that I've built in is that I'm just gonna go and do it. That's the expectation I have of myself, and that's the expectation that I've built into my social network. So that's one example, and it suffuses every piece of moving through the season. All of my workouts happen within that context. Most of my easy runs happen within that context. So, you know, as I get closer to championship season, things start getting harder. I rely on, my trust in my coach, in myself, in my body, um, to be able to handle the workload and push myself to get what is necessary out of myself to be able to have those things to point back to, because when you're in the race, what ends up happening is at any given point, you have four choices, but really there are only three. You can speed up, you can slow down, you can stay at the same pace, or you can drop out. And I'm not going to drop out. So I got three choices in any given moment. And it's how do you make those decisions? And so all of the decisions that I make through training and in my life outside of training is all it's working from the same algorithm. And so I try to train myself to show up in the ways that I believe that is necessary for me as an individual, but also in service of my community. And so all of these things are happening in this context. And I'm able to, in those moments, do my best to live in alignment where I take my purpose and I get everything in a row to my goals. And it's like, kind of like the idea of being able to throw a strong punch. You want to be able to connect with the ground. If you connect with the ground fully through the chain of your body, you can put a lot of force behind that punch. And so, in that sense, like my goals can be higher to where now, I had this experience this past year of going to the Olympic trials for two events. I qualified in the 5K and in the steeplechase. And it's like that was a goal of mine. And another goal was to make the final. But, my systems and who I was and where I was at wasn't enough for that. And so it's like, okay, well, now I need to look back at my systems and see where along the chain is something kinked. Because if something's kinked, I'm losing energy. And that's the kind of mentality that I take into training and into my life outside of training.
By the way, you notice I didn't ask because I figured if you had qualified and made it to the Olympics, you would have asked to reschedule our interview. And so here you are. And I'm just going to say congratulations for making it to the qualifiers.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's interesting because you know, one of the tools that I use all of the time is zooming in and out, right? So I zoom in on any given workout to say, like, okay, what is this workout doing for me? Okay, zoom in even farther. What is this rep of this workout doing for me? Zoom in even farther. What is this straightaway on the track during this rep? And so it's like you're able to zoom in on a time scale, but also on an expectation scale. I zoom in to the point where, like, not making the final at the Olympic trials felt like a failure to me. But I zoom out and I'm able to say, well, I was still one of the top 30 in the US, and the people that I'm competing against are some of the best in US history. So it's like it's a matter of being able to zoom in and out because, like, anytime that you're super passionate about a goal, or you open up the door for those goals to become expectations, and then when they're not met, there's all sorts of negative experiences that can come with that because you start to doubt your self-worth and all of this kind of stuff, and I'm not interested in that. So zooming out allows me to see it as like, oh, this is one small pattern within running, that is one small pattern within the larger pattern that is me.
Hmm. It is interesting. By the way, nice metaphor. Zoom in and zoom out. You first said that as I let you zoom yourself out, um, or in, depending on how you look at it. And I love the focus that one has. Like it is hard when you. Let's talk about this for a second. So you get to the qualifiers. You're in that qualification, and you don't make it, right? And I loved how you said. I'm repeating exactly what you said, and you're like, oh, I'm a failure, right? And it's for most humans, we're going to say that at least once. But whether it's zooming in or out or whatever it is, to then step back and go, wait a second. In an extremely competitive year, I was one of the top 30 in the US in this area. That's amazing, right? And what a powerful thing to be able to say.
Right. But it's interesting because, like, this is like the double-edged sword of my social network and the structures that I built in, right? Because I'm surrounded by excellence, and excellence becomes the expectation, and expectation erodes inspiration, and it changes the way that you relate to these things. So it's like one of the things that I've been trying to do after the trials is, in this period of reflection, try to figure out how can I be inspired by my own story? How can I give myself more credit for the work that I've done? I don't need to do more work. I'm doing an incredible amount of work, and I have done an incredible amount of work for 20 years. I've been running since I was 7. I am a 29-year-old. So, like, I've been doing this for a long time, and I figured a lot of things out along these lines, but it's not about how do I do more, it's how do I give myself more from what I've already done.
So what's next in your life?
I'm going back to school. I'm getting a second master's degree in strategic communication design.
Hmm. Tell me why. What's the focus?
Yeah, so um, running is a temporary thing. No matter how good you are or how injury resistant you are. Like, I will not be able to do this for the rest of my life in this way. I still intend to run as best I can, but I'm not going to be able to qualify for the Olympics when I'm 70. Like, that's just not going to happen. So, you know, I did everything that I did in college to try to set myself up well, but who I am has fundamentally changed from who I was in college, and I don't want the same things. I got my initial master's degree in sports administration. I got a major in kinesiology and a minor in art, and I was like, I'm going to be a college coach. And then now when I'm reflecting on like who am I, what do I want, what do I need? I'm like, the only thing that's really going to take me out of running is not wanting to travel all as much as I do, and I don't really want the pressures or stresses of these kinds of like competitions anymore. And there's like the financial drain of trying to go to these competitions is really high. So it's like, am I really going to want to be a college coach? Their schedules are so similar, and the expectations on them are so similar. It's like I won't be putting my body on the line as much in the same way, but like man, I don't know if I really want that anymore. And so in reflecting on that, I was trying to think of like, well, what do I want? What am I passionate about? What do I care about? And the things that I care about are I really want to be able to be a resource for people. And I want to, I kind of view like anybody who's pushing the frontiers of what they're capable of is almost like we're mining for gold, right? And like I view it as like this foraging mission where I'm at the frontiers of what I'm capable of. And because I've been at this frontier for so long, I'm at the frontier of what humans are capable of. And if I'm able to garner those insights and bring them back to the everyday community that's not going to push themselves by running hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles, then maybe what I can do is I can offer those insights to people to where they can learn from me without having to have done the work that I've done. So
Mm.
this degree in strategic communication design is an effort to take that and find ways to communicate succinctly and with surgical precision to the people that I need to reach and give them the gifts of my knowledge.
Who are the people you need to reach?
Right.
Yeah, no, that was
Sports
an open-ended
enthusiasts living
question.
their best lives.
Yeah, yeah, no, I got it. Oh, so you're sharing your C-pop. So, by the way, we talked ahead of time. I shared a C-pop, and Brian's like, "Huh, I kind of like it." So, Brian, go ahead. What is your C-pop? Your customer point of possibilities?
My CPOP is sports enthusiasts living their best lives. And
All right. What
in
does
reflection
that
on that,
mean to you? Yeah.
so we were talking about this a little bit beforehand, but I think that like one of the things that draws people to me is like I said, mentioned earlier, is the presence that I'm able to give them. And I think that the resonance is on people that are interested in performing. And whether that means on an athletic sphere or in their own lives, whatever that means to them as individuals, like those are the people that tend to get the most out of working with me. And, you know, I have a special interest in trying to bridge the gap between insight and action, and I use running as like the laboratory for a lot of this. And so what I want to do is I want to take those lessons from the laboratory and empower the people that are enthusiastic about living their best lives with what I've been able to learn.
It's interesting as I was listening to you earlier in this conversation, so many people don't have accountability. And so what you did is you orchestrated the forcing of accountability into your life. And and just to be clear, not only for yourself, but for those people in your running group. Why did you realize that you needed to do that?
Oh man, there's this wonderful concept called an Odyssean shackle. Uh, and so, the story of Odysseus is he wanted to hear the sirens sing. And so he plugged his sailors' ears with wax and chained himself to the mast so that he wouldn't go overboard and seduced by the siren song and drown. And he's like, no matter what I say or what I do, don't unchain me until we're past this. And so he created a structure that locked a future version of him into a situation. And that's kind of like the way that I think about, you know, a lot of these types of things. So for me, I've always been internally motivated, and I kind of bring that energy to a lot of groups, and people are able to benefit from that energy. But I also recognize that there's going to be periods and times when I'm not doing that. But it's also, if I can create an Odyssean shackle that allows me to reduce friction in my systems, then that energy that would have been lost as friction in that system allows me to punch that much harder or push that much higher or run that much faster. So that's how I decided that it was something that I needed to create those kinds of structures.
Ah, it's so fascinating. All right. So you definitely, from what I could tell, you have the intent and commitment to do the right thing. Um, from my conversations with you, you've been coachable and vulnerable.
Mm.
Is there a particular experience where you've been coachable from somebody else and acted vulnerably, maybe in terms of running or maybe in terms of life?
Oh, yeah, constantly, all the time. Vulnerability is so important to me. I think that so my college coach, Steve Magnus, is someone who's probably many of the people listening to this will recognize. He's an author, co-author with Brad Stolberg on many books, and his a lot of the things that he instilled into me when I was running under him was that like the true meaning of toughness. In running, people talk about being tough all the time and they associate it with this like grit and this bear down and that's not really it. Like that's not sustainable because if you think about it, like that's tension, and we don't want tension. The way that you perform the best and the way that you live best is if you identify sources of tension and you relax them. And so for me, when it comes to being vulnerable, it's that costly signal that allows a connection to be made. And I feel like the ability to hold space, to have time for, and to share in vulnerability with people is what creates that social bond. And when that social bond is in place, then the we becomes stronger than the I. And in that, the purpose gets wider and wider and wider. And when you have a wider base, you can build higher.
By the way, in terms of the clip that you want to use on your website, it was that one right there.
Sweet. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thought I'd mention it. That was beautiful. Absolutely incredible. Yeah, it's interesting when I'm thinking about you. So who, in terms of your clientele, who would get excited about you today and why? I mean, besides everything I hear and the vulnerability and holding space, but what is it that they're ultimately coming to you for? And maybe an example of what you've delivered.
I think a lot of the times people come to me for accountability and clarity. Um, there's, for the people that I coach in terms of run training, like obviously there's the run background of being able to write a training program that's going to keep people injury free and stuff like that. But I think that on the larger scale, people come to me when they have an interest in diving deeper, right? So one of the first questions that I ask the people that I coach is like, why? Why are you doing this? Why do you want to do this? Right? Because running is a hard thing and it's going to be hard. And there's going to be days where it's exceptionally hard. What keeps you coming back? What is it that you see here? Right? Because running points to something. For me, running has always been the space in which I can meet myself and the ways that I gain deeper knowledge of who I am through experience. So I try to understand what that thing is for people. And in doing that, I provide clarity for them because they may not have thought of this in this way. So many times I get people that just say, "Oh, I just love it." And I'm like, "Okay, what do you love about it? What's under that? What's under that? What's under that?" And we keep digging. And so I provide a space to dig and get deep with it. And that's kind of a space that I bring in my coaching, in my running, in my design work, in my poetry, all of it. So I try to keep that depth as something that's kind of central to who I am, kind of like a still waters run deep kind of thing.
So you absolutely, as you're holding space for somebody and they give you an answer,
Mm.
you somehow know that there's something deeper than the surface answer they've given you.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's there's the words that I'm saying, and then there's the meaning behind them, right? Like that's the puzzle of human communication in a nutshell. It's like we're always going to say something, but what we're saying isn't necessarily always what we're saying, right? Like even that sentence, like being able to point to a deeper meaning using the same word twice, right? Like there's nuance here.
I love that. Hey, so if for those people who are listening or watching and they want to reach out to you, what would be the best way for them to go about doing that?
Yeah, so for any creative work, I'm on Instagram as Ink and Echoes Creative. Um, for my running journey, I'm at Be Razzle Dazzle 5K. Uh, and I have my website as inkandechoes.com. Um, if you're interested in following along in my journey, you can find me at any of those places. Feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to be a resource to anybody that I can.
Mm, I love that. You truly are a servant leader. All right. So, based on this conversation, is there a question I should have asked you that I didn't?
Hmm. I'm sure there's many questions that you should have asked me that you didn't. I think one that I would like to be asked is what sort of resources can I offer to people, just, things that have been materially important to me in my journey. Um, and so the answer to that is like, I'm a big reader. So I've read a lot of books. I'm always interested in resources that are going to challenge me or allow me to explore with an open mind. So, with that as context, I'm a big fan of journaling. It's a practice that I've done for several years now. I'm at the point where I have four different journals. One is kind of like a daily recap, one is specifically for my training, one is for like doing the deep personal work that's necessary, and then one is for my design work. So, all of these kinds of things, just like allow you to kind of hold conversation and hold space for yourself and allow in my desire to live an examined life, having these conversations help me figure out what I think about things and what I how I relate to challenging concepts and concepts that that are nebulous enough to not be able to just like, oh yes, right. So that's something that's materially important. There's a handful of books. I'm a big fan of The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate, which is about healing in a toxic culture. Then there's also How to Do the Work by Dr. Nicole LaPera, and not a book, but a podcast that I've found incredibly helpful and important and empowering and inspiring is the Finding Mastery podcast with Michael Gervais. They dive into a lot of really, really good stuff.
Mm. I so enjoy this conversation. There's so many different ways when you're working with somebody else and you're on a podcast, right? And I often sometimes when I'm on somebody else's podcast, I ask them a question and I don't know why I still catch people off guard. Okay, do you want TV answers? 20 to 40 seconds, or do you want more longer term radio answers? And if somebody says, well, what would you like? Right? I often go, well, if you're up for it, I'll give you TV answers because then you could ask more questions. Right.
Mm, yeah.
And you were really good at giving solid information, solid points in a short period of time that allowed for more questions.
Mm,
And so I just want to say thank you. I
thank you.
appreciate this interaction and exchange. There isn't necessarily a right or wrong. Some people like longer form storytelling stuff, but I just want to say thank you. I appreciate spending the time with you.
Likewise, it's been a pleasure. I always love going deep.
Well, for those who are still here, this is now your time to spread some cred dust. So take that aha message that you heard that you want to share, click the like button, share with your friends. And we'll see you at the next episode of Leaders Living Their Values. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care. Bye now.